My brother Jake, a security consultant, called me while I was making dinner. Rachel, I need to ask you something weird. Is David home right now? I glanced through the kitchen doorway at my husband of 9 years, sitting in his recliner watching the evening news. Yeah, he's in the living room. Why? Jake's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. That's impossible. I'm looking at him right now through surveillance footage at TechNova Industries downtown. He's been there for the past 3 hours in meetings. Just then, I heard David's voice behind me. Who's calling, honey? The coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering against the kitchen tile in a cascade of ceramic and steaming liquid. David rushed over, his face creased with concern as he grabbed paper towels from the counter. Jesus, Rachel, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I stared at him, really stared, cataloging every familiar detail. The small scar through his left eyebrow from a hockey accident in college. The way his dark hair curled slightly behind his ears when it needed cutting. The laugh lines around his brown eyes that had deepened over our 9 years together. Everything exactly as it should be. Jake, I managed into the phone, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Can you send me that footage? Already did. Check your messages. David was still cleaning up the coffee, muttering about how we needed to replace these old mugs anyway. The same David who forgot to take out the trash, but remembered exactly how I like my morning coffee. The same David who sang off-key in the shower and left his socks on the bedroom floor. My phone buzzed. The video file loaded slowly, showing grainy black and white security footage from what appeared to be a conference room. There, clear as day, sat David in his navy suit, the same suit hanging in our closet upstairs, gesturing animatedly during what looked like a presentation to 5 other people. The timestamp read 4:47 p.m. It was currently 6:23 p.m. Everything all right? David asked, straightening up with a handful of coffee-soaked paper towels. You're acting strange. I looked from my phone to my husband, then back to my phone. The David in the video wore the same watch, had the same gesture of running his hand through his hair when making a point. But the David standing in our kitchen had supposedly been home since 4:30, complaining about traffic on Highway 101. Fine, I lied, forcing a smile. Just clumsy today, I guess. Jake's voice crackled through the phone speaker. Rachel? You still there? I'll call you back, I said quickly, ending the call before David could hear more. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while David slept peacefully beside me. His breathing was even, familiar, the same soft snore that had annoyed me for years but now felt strangely comforting. I found myself studying his sleeping face in the dim light filtering through our bedroom curtains, looking for something, anything, that felt wrong. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and crept downstairs to my laptop. The security footage Jake had sent was just the beginning. He'd included 3 other files. Additional camera angles from the same meeting, showing David from different perspectives. In one, he was clearly visible shaking hands with someone I recognized as Margaret Chen, TechNova's CEO. In another, he was presenting what looked like financial charts to the same group. The problem was that David worked for Morrison Financial Planning, a small firm in Palo Alto that handled retirement accounts for middle-class families. He'd never mentioned TechNova Industries, a major tech company developing AI software. We shared everything, or so I'd thought. I pulled up our joint calendar. Yesterday showed client meetings 2 to 6 p.m. in David's schedule. No mention of TechNova, no specific client names, nothing that would explain his presence at one of Silicon Valley's most prominent companies. My hands trembled slightly as I opened our bank statements. Everything looked normal at first glance. David's paychecks from Morrison Financial deposited regularly, our shared expenses for groceries and utilities, my salary from the marketing firm where I worked as a creative director. But as I dug deeper, I found small discrepancies I'd never noticed before. Cash withdrawals of $500 here, $750 there. Always just under $1,000. Always from ATMs I didn't recognize. When I traced the locations, they formed a pattern around San Jose and Fremont. Areas where David had no reason to be. The deposits were even stranger. His Morrison Financial salary was $87,000 annually, paid bi-weekly in exact amounts that never varied. But scattered throughout our account were additional deposits. $2,300 3 weeks ago, $1,875 last month, $3,200 in April. The amounts seemed random, but they all came from something called Meridian Consulting Services. I'd never heard David mention Meridian Consulting. By sunrise, I had a list of 15 separate inconsistencies spanning the past 6 months. Money from sources I couldn't identify, meetings at companies where he supposedly didn't work, and now video evidence of him being in 2 places at once. David found me in the kitchen, still in my pajamas, surrounded by printed bank statements and scribbled notes. "You're up early," he said, kissing the top of my head as he reached for the coffee maker. "Working on something?" "Just balancing our accounts," I said, watching his reflection in the kitchen window. "Found some charges I don't recognize." His hand paused halfway to the coffee filters. "Oh, like what?" "Meridian Consulting Services. They've been depositing money into our account. Do you know what that's about?" The pause lasted 3 seconds too long. In 9 years of marriage, I'd learned to read David's tells. The way his jaw tightened when he was thinking of how to phrase something. The slight delay before answering when he was being careful with his words. "Oh, that," he said finally, his voice carefully casual. "Morrison Financial outsources some work to them. Overflow clients during busy periods. I meant to mention it." "Since when does Morrison Financial have overflow clients?" "Last month you complained about not having enough business." Another pause. "It's new. Started a few months ago." I watched him make his coffee with the same precise routine he'd followed for years. 2 sugars, splash of cream, stirred exactly 5 times clockwise. The familiar ritual felt like watching a skilled actor perform a well-rehearsed scene. "What kind of work do you do for them?" "Same stuff. Financial planning, investment advice. Nothing exciting." He was lying. I could feel it in the careful way he modulated his voice, the way he kept his back to me while we talked. David was many things. Absent-minded, overly optimistic about his fantasy football team, incapable of loading the dishwasher correctly, but he'd never been a good liar. My phone rang. Jake's name appeared on the screen. "Take it," David said, settling at the breakfast table with his coffee and newspaper. "I know you two need to catch up." I stepped onto our back patio, sliding the glass door closed behind me. "I've been up all night looking into this," Jake said without preamble. "That TechNova meeting?" It wasn't just any meeting. They were discussing a $50 million acquisition deal. I have a contact there who owed me a favor. "David doesn't know anything about $50 million deals," I said, but even as I spoke the words, I wasn't sure anymore. "Here's what's really strange. I ran facial recognition on the security footage through some software I use for work. The David in that conference room? The biometric markers are perfect. It's not a lookalike or a twin. According to the computer, that's definitely your husband." I sank into one of our patio chairs, watching a neighbor walk their dog across the street. Everything looked so normal, so ordinary. Suburban houses with neat lawns, sprinkler systems automatically watering flower beds, someone's cat sunning itself on a front porch. That's impossible. I thought so too. So I checked something else. I pulled traffic camera footage from Highway 101 yesterday between 4 and 5 p.m. David's car, license plate 8T3X4P9, passed 3 different cameras heading home. The timestamps match exactly with when he should have been driving from Palo Alto. My stomach dropped. So he was driving home while simultaneously sitting in a meeting? That's what the evidence shows. "Rachel, I think we need to consider some possibilities that might sound crazy." Through the patio door, I could see David reading his newspaper, occasionally sipping his coffee. The picture of normalcy, except nothing was normal anymore. What kind of possibilities? Deepfake technology has advanced incredibly fast, but creating real-time video that could fool security cameras would require serious resources. We're talking about technology that costs millions to develop. You think someone is faking surveillance footage to make it look like David was somewhere he wasn't? Why would anyone do that? Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe someone is faking evidence that he was home when he was actually at TechNova. The thought sent ice through my veins. I watched David turn a page of his newspaper, the motion as familiar as breathing. That's insane. This is my husband we're talking about, not some international spy. "Rachel, what exactly does David do at Morrison Financial?" "He's a financial planner. He helps people set up retirement accounts and college savings plans. He's been there for 6 years." I called Morrison Financial this morning. They have no record of a David Morrison working there. In fact, they've never heard of him. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. That can't be right. He goes to work every day. He complains about his boss, tells me about difficult clients. He brought home their company Christmas party photos last year. Can you access those photos now? I thought about our laptop, the folder labeled work events that David had shown me. His arm around colleagues whose names I'd forgotten, everyone smiling at what he described as an awkward party with too much wine and not enough food. "I'll check and call you back." Inside, David was exactly where I'd left him, newspaper spread across the breakfast table, coffee mug at his right hand. The morning light, streaming through our kitchen windows, illuminated the scene with golden warmth, like a painting of domestic contentment. "Jake doing okay?" he asked without looking up. "He's fine. Just work stuff." I went upstairs to our bedroom, to the laptop we shared for managing household expenses and storing photos. The work events folder contained exactly what I remembered, dozens of photos from what appeared to be Morrison Financial's holiday party. David in a dark suit, his arm around a red-headed woman he'd identified as his colleague Sarah. David raising a toast with an older man he'd called his boss, Jim Morrison. But now, looking more carefully, something felt wrong about the images. The lighting was inconsistent between photos that should have been taken in the same room. David's clothing had subtle differences. His tie slightly askew in one photo, perfectly straight in the next, then askew again. Most strangely, while David appeared in sharp focus in every image, the background seemed slightly blurred, like someone had used a green screen effect. I opened the photos in editing software, zooming in on details I'd never examined before. The pixels around David's edges showed compression artifacts consistent with digital manipulation. The shadows fell at impossible angles. The reflections in windows behind him showed different times of day than the apparent party lighting suggested. These weren't real photos. They were composites, carefully constructed to create the illusion of a workplace that might not exist. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Don't trust anything you think you know. Meet me at Cafe Luna on University Avenue at 2 p.m. today. Come alone. I have information about your husband that will change everything. A friend." I stared at the message, every instinct screaming that this was dangerous. But the evidence was mounting too quickly to ignore. The surveillance footage, the fake employment records, the doctored photos. Someone had constructed an elaborate lie around David's supposed job. "Honey?" David's voice called from downstairs. "I'm heading to work. Love you." I heard the front door close, the sound of his car starting in our driveway, the familiar routine of a man going to his job. Except now I knew the job was fiction. I waited until I was sure he was gone, then went to his home office. David kept this room meticulously organized, unlike the rest of our house, where his belongings tended to migrate randomly. His desk held the usual items: a computer monitor, keyboard, a few financial planning textbooks, family photos in silver frames. But when I tried to turn on his computer, it required a password I'd never seen before. David and I had always shared our passwords, a gesture of trust that now felt naive. I tried our anniversary date, my birthday, his mother's maiden name. Nothing worked. The desk drawers were locked. In 9 years of marriage, David had never locked anything in our house. We didn't even lock our bedroom door. I searched for keys, finally finding a small silver key taped inside the pencil holder. The top drawer contained business cards for Meridian Consulting Services, listing David as a senior technology consultant. The address was in downtown San Jose, about 30 minutes from our house. The cards felt expensive, high-quality cardstock with embossed lettering. The bottom drawer held something that made my hands shake. 3 different driver's licenses, all with David's photo but different names. David Martinez, David Thompson, David Chen. Each license showed the same face I'd been kissing goodnight for 9 years, but the addresses were scattered across the Bay Area. Underneath the licenses was a thin folder containing printouts of email conversations I'd never seen. The sender names were blocked out, but the subject lines made my blood run cold. Next phase authorization, target confirmation, timeline adjustment required. One email, dated just 2 weeks ago, made me sit down heavily in David's desk chair. Phase 1 complete. Subject maintains no suspicion of substitution. Proceeding with Phase 2 as scheduled. Estimated completion, 30 days. Recommend maintaining current behavioral patterns to avoid detection. Substitution. The word echoed in my mind like a struck bell. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands trembling so badly I had to retake several shots. Then I carefully returned the items to exactly where I'd found them, locked the drawers, and replaced the key. At 1:45 p.m., I sat in my car outside Cafe Luna, watching people walk along University Avenue. Students from Stanford, tech workers in fleece jackets, families with strollers. Everyone looked normal, living their normal lives, unaware that someone's reality was crumbling just feet away. The woman who approached my table at exactly 2 p.m. looked to be in her 40s, with short brown hair and the kind of understated confidence that suggested either law enforcement or high-level corporate work. She wore dark jeans and a black blazer, carrying a leather portfolio that she set carefully on the table between us. "Rachel? I'm Maria Santos. Thank you for coming." "How do you know my name? How did you get my phone number?" Maria signaled the waitress for coffee before answering. "I work for a private security firm that specializes in identity theft and corporate espionage. Your husband is part of an investigation we've been conducting for 8 months. Investigation into what? TechNova Industries has been experiencing systematic theft of proprietary technology. Someone with inside access has been copying and selling their AI development research to competitors. We identified David as a person of interest 6 weeks ago. I felt the world tilt sideways. David doesn't work for TechNova. He's never even mentioned them. Maria opened her portfolio and extracted a series of photographs. The first showed David entering a building I didn't recognize, wearing a security badge. The second showed him at what appeared to be a workstation, typing on a computer, surrounded by complex technical diagrams. These were taken last month at TechNova's secure research facility. Your husband has been working there for almost a year, using the identity David Chen. He holds a senior position in their AI development division. That's impossible. But even as I said it, I was thinking about the cash deposits, the unexplained absences, the way he sometimes received phone calls that made him step outside to talk privately. We believe David is part of a sophisticated industrial espionage operation. Multiple individuals with false identities have infiltrated TechNova and other tech companies. They copy research, steal prototypes, and sell the information to overseas competitors. Maria showed me another photo. David shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit outside what looked like a restaurant in San Francisco's financial district. This was taken 3 days ago. The other man is Vincent Kozlov, a known broker for stolen technology. Based on our surveillance, your husband has met with him at least 12 times in the past 4 months. My coffee arrived, but I couldn't imagine drinking anything. My stomach felt like it was full of acid. If this is true, why hasn't he been arrested? Because we're not sure who David really is. The man you're married to has no background before 7 years ago. No college records, no employment history, no family connections. It's as if David Morrison simply materialized fully formed as an adult. The timeline matched exactly with when I'd met David at a coffee shop near the marketing firm where I worked. He'd been reading a financial planning textbook, and we'd struck up a conversation about his career change from corporate accounting to helping families plan for retirement. A story that now seemed like a carefully constructed cover identity. You think he married me as part of some long-term deception? Maria's expression softened slightly. I think you were chosen specifically because you work in marketing, which requires security clearance for some corporate clients. Your access to confidential business information would be valuable to someone conducting industrial espionage. The thought was devastating. Our entire relationship, our marriage, our life together, all of it potentially built on lies designed to exploit my professional access. There's something else, Maria continued. We have reason to believe the David you've been living with isn't the same person who originally infiltrated TechNova. What do you mean? Facial recognition analysis shows subtle differences between recent surveillance footage and images from 6 months ago. The bone structure is identical, but there are micro differences in facial expressions, gestures, and speech patterns. We think the original David was replaced by someone else. My mind struggled to process this information. You're saying someone is impersonating my husband who was already impersonating someone else? It's a technique used in long-term identity theft operations. When the original operative becomes compromised or needs to disappear, they're replaced by someone trained to mimic their behavior perfectly. Usually, the people closest to them never notice the substitution. I thought about the past 6 months, trying to remember if David had seemed different in any way. Had his laugh changed? Did he still have the same preferences for food, movies, the way he arranged his sock drawer? The more I tried to analyze our interactions, the more uncertain I became about what was real. Why are you telling me this instead of the FBI? Because we need your help. The operation is too sophisticated for traditional law enforcement. We need someone with inside access who can gather evidence without alerting them that we're closing in. Maria pushed a small device across the table. It looked like a USB drive, but smaller and flatter. This contains monitoring software. If you can install it on David's computer, it will copy everything. Files, emails, internet history, even keystrokes will have enough evidence to arrest everyone involved. And if I say no, then they'll probably disappear within the next few weeks, taking millions of dollars in stolen technology with them, and you'll never know who you've really been married to. I stared at the device, weighing impossible choices. Help strangers investigate my husband, or continue living with someone who might be an elaborate lie. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know you're not the ones trying to deceive me? Maria reached into her portfolio again. this time extracting an official-looking document with FBI letterhead. Agent Jennifer Walsh is leading the federal investigation into this network. Her direct number is on that card. Call her if you want verification. I took the card, noting the official seal and contact information that looked legitimate. If I do this, what happens to me? If David is really involved in corporate espionage, am I considered an accomplice? Not if you cooperate with the investigation. Agent Walsh can offer immunity in exchange for your assistance. The cafe around us buzzed with normal afternoon activity. Students typing on laptops, business people having casual meetings, couples sharing pastries and planning their weekends. I envied them their ordinary problems. I need time to think about this. You have until tomorrow. After that, we move forward with or without your help. Maria stood, leaving her coffee untouched. Rachel, I know this is overwhelming, but you deserve to know the truth about your life. After she left, I sat alone for another hour, watching traffic move along University Avenue. Everything looked the same as it had that morning, but my perception of reality had shifted fundamentally. The man I'd been married to for 9 years might be a stranger. The life we'd built together might be a carefully constructed lie. Even my own identity felt uncertain now. Was I Rachel Morrison, happily married marketing executive? Or was I Rachel Morrison, unwitting accomplice to international crime? I drove home in a daze, parking in our driveway next to David's car. He was home early, something that had become more common recently. Another detail that now seemed suspicious rather than pleasant. Hey, babe, he called from the kitchen as I entered through the front door. How was your afternoon? Fine. Just ran some errands. I found him making dinner, chopping vegetables for what looked like stir-fry. The domestic scene felt surreal after everything I'd learned. This man, who might not be my husband, preparing a meal in the kitchen where we'd shared thousands of conversations about our future together. I was thinking we should take a vacation soon, David said, not looking up from his cutting board. Maybe somewhere tropical, the Bahamas or Costa Rica. That sounds nice. Any particular reason? Just feeling like we need a change of scenery, time to reconnect away from work stress. The timing felt significant. Maria had said the investigation was moving into its final phase. Was David planning to disappear, possibly taking me with him as cover? When were you thinking? Soon. Maybe next month. I can arrange some time off. I watched him cook, noting details I'd never paid attention to before. The way he held the knife seemed slightly different than I remembered. His posture while standing at the stove was more upright, less relaxed than the David who used to hum off-key while cooking. Small differences that could be explained by mood or fatigue, but now felt potentially significant. During dinner, I found myself studying his face like a forensic analyst. The scar through his eyebrow was exactly right. The small mole on his left cheek was in the correct position. Even the chipped tooth from a childhood bicycle accident was perfect, but something in his eyes seemed different, more calculating, more aware. You're quiet tonight, he observed. Everything okay? Just tired. Long day at work? Want to talk about it? The question sounded genuine, concerned. This man, whoever he was, had perfected the art of being David Morrison. He knew exactly what my husband would say, how he would express care and interest in my problems. Nothing specific, just the usual client drama. After dinner, David settled in his recliner to watch the news while I cleaned up. Our normal routine, except now I was hyper-aware of every sound he made, every comment about current events, looking for clues about his true identity. During a commercial break, his phone rang. The ringtone was different than I remembered. A generic beeping instead of the jazz melody David had used for years. Another small detail that might mean nothing or everything. Hello, he answered, and I strained to hear the conversation from the kitchen. His voice dropped to a whisper, and he stepped outside onto our back patio. Through the window, I could see him pacing while talking, his body language tense in a way that seemed uncharacteristic. The call lasted less than 5 minutes, but when he came back inside, his demeanor had changed. He seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly and making excuses to end our evening early. I'm beat, he said around 9 p.m. Think I'll turn in early. David usually stayed up until at least 11, reading financial news or watching late-night comedy shows. Going to bed at 9 was completely out of character. I waited until I heard him brushing his teeth, then quickly checked his phone charging station in the kitchen. His phone wasn't there. He'd taken it to bed with him, another first in our relationship. Lying in bed next to him, I listened to his breathing and found myself questioning everything I thought I knew. Did he sleep on the same side he always had? Did he make the same small movements while dreaming? Was the hand resting on my shoulder the same hand that had touched me for 9 years? At 2 a.m., when I was certain he was deeply asleep, I crept downstairs to our shared laptop. Using the information Maria had given me, I navigated to a secure website and entered Agent Jennifer Walsh's contact information. The response came within minutes. Even at that hour, a brief message asking me to call a secure number at my earliest convenience to discuss Operation Mirror. I stared at the screen, cursor hovering over the reply button. Once I responded, there would be no going back. I would officially become part of a federal investigation into the man sleeping upstairs. But the alternative was continuing to live a lie that seemed to grow more elaborate each day. I typed a short reply, available to meet tomorrow afternoon. Need verification of identity and legal protections before proceeding. After sending the message, I closed the laptop and sat in our darkened living room, looking around at the accumulation of our shared life. Wedding photos on the mantle, furniture we'd chosen together, books we'd both read and discussed. 9 years of memories that might be built on deception. The next morning, David seemed more himself, cheerful, affectionate, making jokes while preparing breakfast. Either he was an exceptionally skilled actor, or my suspicions were making me paranoid about innocent behavior. I have to travel next week, he mentioned casually while buttering toast. Client meeting in Sacramento. Probably be gone Tuesday through Thursday. New client? Referral from an existing one. Retirement planning for a tech executive. The casual mention of tech industry work sent warning bells through my mind. Was this connected to the TechNova investigation? Or was I now suspicious of everything David said? I'll miss you, I said, testing his reaction. Miss you too. But it's good business. These tech guys have serious money to invest. His phone buzzed with what appeared to be a text message. He glanced at it, and I saw his expression tighten almost imperceptibly before he smiled and put the phone away. Everything okay? Just a client confirming our meeting time. But something in his tone suggested the message had been more significant than a simple scheduling confirmation. Agent Walsh's secure facility turned out to be an unremarkable office building in downtown Palo Alto, the kind of place that could house accounting firms or legal offices. I met her on the 3rd floor in a conference room with no windows and what appeared to be signal blocking equipment. Jennifer Walsh looked exactly like what central casting would order for a federal agent. Mid-40s, practical haircut, conservative suit, and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of my appearance and behavior. Mrs. Morrison, thank you for coming. I understand Maria Santos briefed you on our investigation. She told me my husband might be involved in industrial espionage, that he might not be who I think he is. Agent Walsh opened a thick file folder and spread several photographs across the conference table. These are surveillance photos of your husband taken over the past 8 months. I want you to look carefully and tell me if you notice anything unusual. The photos showed David in various locations, entering buildings, sitting in restaurants, walking down streets. At first glance, they all looked normal. But as I studied them more carefully, I began to see what the agent meant. In photos from 8 months ago, David's posture was slightly different than more recent images. His gait seemed shorter, more careful. His facial expressions, while clearly the same person, had subtle variations in how he smiled, how he held his head when listening. These look like the same person, but his mannerisms are different. We call it behavioral drift. When someone is replaced by an impersonator, there are always small differences in body language and habits that become apparent over time. Agent Walsh showed me another set of photos, these taken with advanced surveillance equipment that highlighted details invisible to casual observation. Voice pattern analysis shows significant changes starting approximately 6 months ago. The timbre and rhythm of his speech patterns shifted in ways consistent with a different person mimicking learned behavior. The timeline again matched with when I'd started noticing small changes in David's routine. His sudden preference for different coffee brands, the way he'd begun arranging his clothes differently in our shared closet, his new interest in cooking styles he'd never attempted before. If someone replaced my husband, what happened to the original David? We don't know. He could be in hiding, he could be working with them voluntarily, or... She paused, choosing her words carefully. He could be deceased. The possibility hit me like a physical blow. The David I'd fallen in love with, married, planned a future with, he might be dead, while I'd been unknowingly living with his replacement. Mrs. Morrison, we need your help to uncover the truth, but I want you to understand the risks. If the person currently living in your home discovers you're investigating him, you could be in danger. What kind of danger? These operations involve millions of dollars and sophisticated criminal networks. They don't hesitate to eliminate threats to their success. The conference room felt suddenly cold. I was discussing my own potential murder as casually as planning a grocery shopping trip. What do you need me to do? Agent Walsh produced the same type of device Maria had shown me, along with detailed instructions for installing surveillance software on David's computer. This will allow us to monitor his communications in real time. We'll also need you to document any unusual behavior, travel patterns, or conversations. Most importantly, we need advance warning if he attempts to leave the country. The vacation he mentioned, to the Bahamas or Costa Rica. Exactly. Countries without extradition treaties, perfect for disappearing permanently. I took the device, its weight somehow seeming much heavier than its actual size. What happens after you arrest him? What happens to me? If you cooperate fully with our investigation, you'll be protected under federal witness protection guidelines. Your identity and safety will be our responsibility. The thought of entering witness protection, abandoning my life and career to escape the consequences of my husband's crimes, was almost as devastating as learning about the crimes themselves. How long do I have to decide? David's travel plans suggest this operation is in its final phase. We estimate less than 2 weeks before they attempt to disappear. After that, we'll lose our opportunity to shut down the entire network. I left the federal building with my mind reeling. 2 weeks to uncover the truth about my marriage, my identity, and my future. 2 weeks to determine whether the man sharing my bed was my husband or a dangerous stranger. That evening, David seemed particularly affectionate, suggesting we order takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant and watch a movie together. The domesticity felt both comforting and terrifying. Was this genuine affection, or was he trying to keep me distracted while planning his escape? During the movie, I found myself studying his profile in the flickering light from the television. Every feature was exactly as I remembered, but knowing what I now knew made everything feel different. The way he laughed at certain jokes, the way he absently stroked my hair while we watched, were these learned behaviors or genuine responses? His phone, which he now carried constantly, buzzed with messages throughout the evening. Each time, he would glance at the screen with an expression I couldn't quite read before putting it away without responding. Popular night, I commented after the 5th message. Just work stuff. Clients always want to talk outside business hours. But Morrison Financial, if it really existed, handled simple retirement planning for middle-class families. The kind of business that didn't require constant urgent communication on weekend evenings. After David fell asleep, I lay awake, planning how to install the surveillance software without detection. His computer was in the home office, which he'd recently started locking whenever he left the house. I would need to act quickly during the brief window when he was in the shower the next morning. The opportunity came at 7:30 a.m. when David announced he was running late and needed to shower quickly before an early client meeting. I listened to the water running upstairs while I hurried to his office with the device Agent Walsh had given me. The computer required a password, but I'd watched David type it several times from the kitchen doorway. A combination of numbers and letters that spelled out Meridian 2023, the name of the consulting company I wasn't supposed to know about. The surveillance software installed in less than 3 minutes, invisible once activated. According to the instructions, it would transmit copies of all emails, files, and internet activity to federal servers within hours. David emerged from the shower just as I finished hiding the installation device in our bedroom. He dressed quickly, kissed me goodbye with what seemed like genuine affection, and left for his mysterious job at a company that might not exist. Within hours, my phone buzzed with a message from Agent Walsh. Initial data recovered. Critical information obtained. Need to meet immediately. The federal building's conference room felt different this time, charged with urgency. Agent Walsh had spread dozens of printouts across the table, emails, financial records, and what appeared to be technical documents I couldn't understand. Your husband, or the person impersonating him, is deeper into this operation than we realized, she began without preamble. He's not just stealing technology, he's coordinating the entire West Coast network. She showed me email conversations between David and contacts across California, Oregon, and Washington. Code names, money transfers, and schedules for what appeared to be systematic theft from multiple tech companies. Vincent Kozlov, the man Maria showed you meeting with David? He's actually David's subordinate, not his contact. Your husband is running the operation. The scope of the criminal enterprise was staggering. Dozens of individuals working across multiple states, stealing technology worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And at the center of it all was the man I'd been sharing a bed with for 6 months. This email is particularly concerning, Agent Walsh said, pointing to a message dated 3 days ago. David is planning something called Operation Cleanup for next weekend. Based on the context, we believe this involves eliminating evidence and potentially witnesses. The word witnesses hung in the air like a threat. I was a witness, whether I wanted to be or not. There's something else. We've identified the original David Morrison. She produced another photograph, this one clearly taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. It showed a man who looked exactly like my husband, but thinner, with longer hair and what appeared to be a beard. He was walking out of what looked like a grocery store. This was taken yesterday in Portland, Oregon. The original David Morrison is alive, but he's been living under a different identity for the past 8 months. I stared at the photo, trying to reconcile this stranger with the man I'd married. Is he part of the criminal organization? We believe he was the original operative who infiltrated TechNova. But something went wrong about 6 months ago, a security breach or internal conflict. Instead of extracting him safely, they replaced him with someone they trusted more. The person living in my house. His name is Marcus Petrov. He's a former intelligence operative from Eastern Europe who specialized in long-term identity replacement. According to our sources, he's been studying your husband's behavior for years, preparing for this exact scenario. The revelation was like being told I'd been living with an alien. Marcus Petrov. Not David Morrison, not even someone with a similar background. A foreign operative who had learned to mimic my husband so perfectly that I'd never suspected. What does he want with me? Access. Your security clearance, your client relationships in the tech industry, your personal information about families with significant assets. You've been an unwitting asset in their intelligence gathering. Agent Walsh showed me printouts of my own emails, somehow intercepted and analyzed. Conversations with clients, discussions about marketing campaigns, even personal messages to friends. All of it cataloged and studied for potential exploitation. We need to move quickly. Marcus is planning to disappear next week, and based on these communications, we don't think he plans to leave any loose ends behind. The implication was clear. I wasn't just a witness to be protected. I was a potential victim to be eliminated. What do you want me to do? We're going to arrest Marcus tomorrow night, but we need him to incriminate himself first. We need recorded evidence of him admitting to the identity theft and discussing the criminal organization. Agent Walsh produced a small recording device, smaller than a pen, and designed to be hidden in clothing. You'll need to confront him with what you know and record his response. It's dangerous, but it's the only way to guarantee convictions for everyone involved in the network. The thought of confronting Marcus, of pretending I still believed he was David while recording evidence of his crimes, terrified me. I'd been living with a trained intelligence operative for 6 months. If he suspected I knew the truth, I might not survive the conversation. What if he realizes what I'm doing? Backup agents will be positioned around your house. If anything goes wrong, they can intervene within seconds. I took the recording device, its weight somehow seeming enormous despite its tiny size. When? Tomorrow evening. We've intercepted communications indicating he's planning to leave town on Friday. This is our last opportunity. That night, I lay in bed next to Marcus, hyper-aware that the man beside me was a stranger who had been studying and mimicking my husband for years. Every breath he took, every small movement in his sleep felt like evidence of elaborate deception. I found myself wondering about the original David, the man I'd actually married. Was he truly part of this criminal conspiracy, or had he been manipulated and eventually replaced? The photograph from Portland suggested he was alive but living in hiding. Did he miss the life we'd built together, or had it all been an assignment to him? The next morning, Marcus seemed different, more alert, more focused. He spent extra time in his office with the door closed, making phone calls in a language I didn't recognize. When he emerged for lunch, his demeanor was businesslike rather than affectionate. "I need to leave town tonight," he announced suddenly. "Emergency client situation." The timeline had accelerated. According to Agent Walsh, his departure wasn't scheduled until Friday. What kind of emergency? Regulatory issue. One of my clients is facing an SEC investigation, and they need immediate assistance restructuring their investments. Another lie, but delivered with the same confidence he'd shown for months. I wondered how many conversations we'd had that were complete fabrications, how many times he'd looked me in the eye and constructed elaborate stories about his fictional work. "How long will you be gone?" "Probably a week." Maybe longer, depending on how complicated the situation becomes. I knew this was goodbye, though he was presenting it as a temporary business trip. After tonight, Marcus Petrov would disappear forever, and David Morrison would become another identity discarded when it was no longer useful. "I'll miss you," I said, and was surprised to find that part of me meant it. Whatever else Marcus was, he'd been kind to me. He'd remembered my birthday, brought me flowers, listened to my work complaints with apparent interest. The affection might have been manufactured, but the experience of it had felt real. "Miss you too," he replied, and for a moment his accent slipped slightly, revealing hints of Eastern European inflection. I spent the afternoon preparing for what might be the most dangerous conversation of my life. The recording device was hidden in a seam of my sweater, invisible but active. Agent Walsh had provided a list of questions designed to elicit incriminating responses, but I would need to work them naturally into dialogue. Marcus returned home at 6 p.m. with takeout from our favorite restaurant, a gesture that would have seemed thoughtful yesterday, but now felt like a farewell performance. During dinner, I watched him with new awareness of how carefully he monitored his own behavior. The way he held his fork was slightly different than I remembered from early in our relationship. His laugh seemed practiced rather than spontaneous. Even his posture was maintained with conscious effort. "David?" I said finally, using the name I now knew was fake. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." He looked up from his food, and I saw caution flicker across his features. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I know about TechNova Industries." The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. I counted them, watching Marcus process this information and calculate his response. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I saw the surveillance footage. You've been working there for months, stealing technology and selling it to competitors." His face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, calculation, and finally resignation. When he spoke again, the British accent was completely gone, replaced by something that might have been Russian or Ukrainian. "How long have you known?" "About a week." "The question is, who are you really?" Marcus set down his fork and leaned back in his chair, studying me with the cold assessment of a professional evaluating a threat. "You are smarter than we anticipated," he said, his voice now carrying the faint accent I'd heard slipping through occasionally. "My name is Marcus Petrov. I have been studying your husband for 3 years, preparing to replace him when the operation required it." The casual admission sent chills through me. He was either confident I couldn't threaten him, or he'd already decided I wouldn't survive this conversation. What happened to the real David? He is alive, but no longer useful to the organization. He developed emotional complications, started to question the mission, became unreliable. Emotional complications? He fell in love with you. Actually fell in love, not just performed the role. It made him a liability. The revelation was both heartbreaking and terrifying. The David I'd married had been real, his feelings genuine, but that authenticity had made him a threat to his handlers. Where is he now? Safe, but isolated, somewhere he cannot interfere with the final phase of the operation. I forced myself to continue the questioning, knowing the recording device was capturing every word. "What is the final phase?" Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Elimination of all evidence, digital records, financial trails, and human witnesses who could compromise the network. Including me. "You were supposed to disappear with me, a romantic vacation that became permanent relocation. But now?" He shrugged eloquently. The casual discussion of my murder was surreal. We were sitting in our dining room, surrounded by wedding photos and shared memories, planning my death over Chinese takeout. "The FBI knows everything," I said, abandoning any pretense of subtlety. "They've been monitoring your communications. They know about Meridian Consulting, Vincent Kozlov, the entire network." Marcus's expression didn't change, but his posture shifted almost imperceptibly. "Interesting. And you have been working with them how long?" "Long enough to gather evidence of everything you've done. You are wearing a recording device right now." It wasn't a question. Somehow he detected the surveillance equipment despite its sophisticated design. "Yes." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Then we have a problem." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small handgun, placing it on the table between us with the casual manner of someone adding salt to their meal. "I do not enjoy violence, Rachel. You have been a pleasant assignment, much more agreeable than most of the people I have had to deceive over the years. But I cannot allow you to compromise 10 years of work." I stared at the gun, my mind racing through escape options. The backup agents were supposedly positioned around the house, but they couldn't act until I was in immediate danger. By then, it might be too late. The FBI will be here any minute, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. No, they will not. I have been monitoring their communications as carefully as they have been monitoring mine. They are not planning to move until tomorrow evening, assuming I would maintain the fiction until then. My heart sank. The elaborate plan had been anticipated and countered by someone with years of intelligence training. However, Marcus continued, I am not without appreciation for your situation. You were an unwitting participant in this deception, manipulated by circumstances beyond your control. He slid a passport across the table. It bore my photograph, but a different name, Sarah Chen. There is a flight to Singapore leaving tonight at 11:30. You can disappear as completely as David did. Start a new life somewhere. The FBI will never find you. And if I refuse? Marcus glanced meaningfully at the gun. Then you become another casualty of industrial espionage gone wrong. A robbery, perhaps, or a home invasion. These things happen with unfortunate frequency in suburban neighborhoods. I looked at the passport, weighing impossible choices. Flee the country and abandon everything I'd built, or die for refusing to participate in my own disappearance. I need time to think. You have until 10 p.m. The car will arrive then, whether you are in it voluntarily or otherwise. Marcus pocketed the gun and resumed eating his dinner as if we'd been discussing vacation plans, rather than murder and international escape. The surreal normalcy of his behavior was somehow more frightening than overt threats. At 9:45 p.m., I made my decision. I retrieved my purse from the kitchen counter, ostensibly to get my identification for the airport journey. But instead of my driver's license, I pulled out the emergency phone Agent Walsh had given me. The text message was simple. He knows. Armed. Moving now. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway as I hit send. Ready to go? As ready as I'll ever be. The sound of vehicles surrounding our house was subtle at first. Car doors closing, footsteps on pavement, the barely audible crackle of radio communications. Marcus heard it too, his expression shifting from confidence to calculation. You clever woman, he said, but there was admiration in his voice rather than anger. The emergency phone. I should have anticipated that. The front door burst open as federal agents flooded into our house, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands. Marcus raised his hand slowly, the gun appearing in his palm as if by magic. Do not be foolish, Agent Walsh called from the living room. You are surrounded. Indeed I am, Marcus replied, but Rachel is here with me, and I suspect you would prefer she remain unharmed. The standoff lasted exactly 17 minutes. I know because I watched the kitchen clock while Marcus held the gun casually at his side, not quite pointing it at me, but making the threat implicit. Agent Walsh negotiated with the patience of someone who had managed similar situations before. She offered safe passage to an airport, then immunity in exchange for information about the larger network, then witness protection if he cooperated fully. Marcus listened to each offer with the detached interest of someone comparing insurance policies. The problem, he finally said, is that cooperation would require me to betray people who would kill me in exceptionally unpleasant ways. While your federal prison system is not appealing, it is preferable to what my former colleagues would do. In the end, he surrendered the weapon and walked calmly into federal custody, hands cuffed behind his back, treating his arrest like a professional setback rather than a personal catastrophe. You played your role well, he told me as agents led him past the kitchen. In different circumstances, I think I could have genuinely cared for you. After he was gone, I sat in our empty house, surrounded by federal agents cataloging evidence. Every item that had seemed like part of our shared life was now potential proof of conspiracy and fraud. Agent Walsh sat across from me at the same dining room table where Marcus had held me at gunpoint 2 hours earlier. We'll need you to testify at the trial, she said. But first, we have some information about your husband, the real David Morrison. She produced a tablet showing a live video feed. The image quality was poor, but I could see someone who looked like David sitting in what appeared to be a small apartment. He's been in protective custody in Oregon for the past 8 months. We've been negotiating his cooperation in exchange for immunity and a new identity. Can I talk to him? Eventually. But Rachel, you need to understand that the David Morrison you married doesn't exist anymore. The man in that video has been living under extraordinary stress, knowing his wife was living with someone else. The psychological impact has been severe. I stared at the video feed, watching my husband, my real husband, move around an apartment I'd never seen. He looked thinner, older, marked by months of isolation and fear. What happens now? Marcus Petrov will likely receive a life sentence. The network he helped expose included 47 individuals across 6 countries. Your testimony will be crucial in dismantling the entire operation. And David? He'll have to decide whether he wants to rebuild his old life or disappear into witness protection. Either way, the person you were married to is gone. Too much has happened for anyone to go back to who they were before. 3 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse in San Francisco, testifying about 9 years of marriage that had turned out to be an elaborate deception. Marcus Petrov, wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles, listened to my testimony with the same professional interest he'd shown during our last dinner together. When asked to identify him in court, I looked directly at the man who had shared my bed for 6 months while impersonating my husband. That is Marcus Petrov. He is not my husband, and he never was. The trial lasted 6 weeks. I testified for 3 days, describing in detail how the deception had been maintained, how surveillance footage had been manipulated, how an entire false identity had been constructed to support industrial espionage. David, the real David, never appeared in court. Agent Walsh told me he'd chosen to enter witness protection under a completely new identity. His testimony was presented through video deposition, his face digitally obscured, his voice electronically altered. Watching him on screen, I tried to find traces of the man I'd fallen in love with 8 years earlier. But time and trauma had changed him into someone I no longer recognized. We were strangers now, bonded only by shared victimization. Marcus received life in prison without possibility of parole. During sentencing, he looked directly at me and nodded once, a gesture that might have been apology, acknowledgement, or simple professional respect. I moved to Portland after the trial, drawn by the knowledge that David was somewhere in the same city, even though I would never see him again. My new apartment overlooked the Willamette River, furnished with items that had no connection to my previous life. The marketing firm that hired me specialized in cybersecurity companies, an irony that wasn't lost on anyone involved. My experience as a victim of sophisticated identity theft made me uniquely qualified to help other companies protect themselves from similar schemes. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter forwarded through Agent Walsh. No return address, postmarked from Vancouver, Canada. Rachel, it began, and I recognized David's handwriting immediately. I hope you can forgive me for the deception that destroyed your life. I never meant for any of this to happen. When I was recruited for what I thought was a legitimate corporate consulting job, I had no idea it would evolve into the criminal enterprise that consumed both our lives. I want you to know that every feeling I expressed during our marriage was genuine. You were the one real thing in a life built on lies, and losing you was more devastating than losing my identity or my freedom. I hope you found peace. I hope you found someone who can love you honestly, without secrets or ulterior motives. You deserved better than what I gave you, and you deserve better than what Marcus took from you. I won't contact you again. This letter is my way of saying goodbye to the only life I ever truly wanted to live. With love and regret, David. I read the letter 3 times before folding it carefully and placing it in a box with our wedding photos and other remnants of a marriage that had been both real and false simultaneously. That evening, I called Jake, who had moved to Seattle after the trial. The stress of discovering the conspiracy had affected him almost as much as it had affected me. He'd quit his security consulting job and now taught computer programming at a community college. "How are you doing?" he asked, the same question he'd been asking every week for months. "Better. Different, but better." "Any regrets about how it all turned out?" I looked out my apartment window at the city lights reflecting in the river. Portland felt like neutral territory, a place where I could rebuild without the weight of deception pressing down on every memory. I regret that it happened, but I don't regret exposing it. 47 people went to prison because we uncovered the truth. Hundreds of millions in stolen technology was recovered. Whatever else happened, we stopped them. Think you'll ever get married again? The question was one I'd been avoiding for months. The idea of trusting someone enough to share my life seemed impossible after learning how completely I'd been deceived. Maybe, someday. But if I do, I'm hiring a private investigator to verify everything first. Jake laughed, but we both knew I wasn't entirely joking. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and began working on something I'd been writing for weeks, a detailed account of the entire experience, from that first phone call to the final trial testimony. The FBI had suggested I write a book about identity theft and corporate espionage, both to help other potential victims and to process my own trauma. The working title was The Man Who Wasn't There, a true story of love, lies, and industrial espionage. As I wrote, I found myself thinking about Marcus Petrov, serving life in prison for crimes that had destroyed multiple lives while generating millions in illegal profits. He'd been a professional, doing a job he'd trained for years to perform. But somewhere in those 6 months of pretending to be my husband, had any of it become real for him? Had he felt genuine affection, or was even his final gesture of offering me escape just another calculated move? I would never know, and perhaps that was for the best. Some truths were too dangerous to pursue. The book was published 18 months later, becoming an unexpected bestseller as corporate espionage cases dominated tech industry headlines. I used the proceeds to establish a foundation helping victims of identity theft navigate the complex intersection of criminal law and personal recovery. On the second anniversary of that first phone call from Jake, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line reads simply, "Thank you." "Miss Morrison," the message began, "you don't know me, but your book probably saved my life. I recognized the patterns you described in my own marriage and discovered my husband had been replaced by someone else 6 months earlier. Because of your story, I knew what questions to ask and how to protect myself during the investigation. The FBI arrested 7 people, and I'm now safely relocated under a new identity. I wanted you to know that sharing your trauma helped prevent mine from becoming worse. A grateful reader." I printed the email and added it to the box with David's letter and our wedding photos, evidence that something positive had emerged from the deception that had nearly destroyed me. That evening, I had dinner with Tom, the cybersecurity consultant I'd been dating for 4 months. He knew my story, had read my book, and understood why I sometimes woke up in the middle of the night checking his identification to make sure he was who he claimed to be. "Rough day?" he asked, noting my distracted mood. "Good day, actually. Just thinking about how strange life can be." "Strange how?" I showed him the email, watching his expression as he read about another woman who had discovered her reality was fabricated. "Does it bother you?" I asked, "knowing that your girlfriend is famous for not recognizing when her husband was replaced by a spy?" Tom considered the question seriously, which was one of the things I'd grown to appreciate about him. He didn't offer easy reassurances or dismiss my concerns. "It bothers me that it happened to you," he said finally, "but it doesn't bother me that you survived it and helped other people survive similar situations. If anything, it makes me more careful about earning your trust." Good answer. Also, he added with a slight smile, "I've been fully background checked by federal agents. If I were a spy, I'd be the most thoroughly investigated spy in history." That night, for the first time in 2 years, I slept without checking the locks on my doors or verifying Tom's identity before letting myself fall asleep beside him. Progress, I thought. Slow, careful progress toward trusting someone again. The next morning brought news that Marcus Petrov had died in federal prison, killed by inmates who discovered his crimes involved stealing from American companies. Even in prison, loyalty to country mattered to some people. I felt no satisfaction at his death, only a strange sense of closure. The man who had impersonated my husband was gone, taking with him the last physical reminder of the deception that had shaped my life. Agent Walsh called that afternoon to inform me officially of Marcus's death and to let me know the investigation was finally closed. "How do you feel?" she asked, echoing Jake's regular question. "Free," I said, and realized I meant it. For the first time in 3 years, I feel completely free. That evening, I took David's letter from the box where I'd kept it safe and walked to the Willamette River. The paper felt fragile in my hands as I read his words one final time, remembering the man I'd married and the life we'd built together before it was stolen by people who saw love as a vulnerability to exploit. I folded the letter carefully and released it into the river, watching it disappear beneath the dark water. Some chapters needed to end completely before new ones could begin. Walking home through Portland's quiet streets, I thought about the book I was planning to write next. A story about recovery, about learning to trust again, about building new lives from the pieces of ones that had been shattered by deception. The working title was After the Lie, Finding Truth in a World of Deception. It would be a different kind of book, focused on healing rather than exposure, on hope rather than betrayal. But it would be true, every word of it, because I'd learned the difference between performance and authenticity. And that difference, I thought as I unlocked my apartment door, was worth everything I'd lost to discover.